mi madre yo soy mexicano, por destino soy americano, yo soy de la raza de oro, yo soy Mexico-americano.
That's right, you're listening to KSQT Santa Cruz, KSQT Prundale, and we're on the K-Squid with our show from the streets with your host Adela and Omar, here to bring another radio to inspire the youth, to inspire the community, and to tell stories through community, empowering our community and bringing the leaders from our community. And today we have a special guest, Enrique's in the house. But like I always like to start my shows, I like to give thanks to the Creator for allowing us to be here to inspire our youth and inspire our community. And Adela, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. I'm excited for today's conversation with Dr. Buelna.
Good. And Enrique, welcome to K-Squid. This is the K-Squid studio. We have a lot of K-Squidders out there driving home ready to listen to your story and some of the work that you do. How are you?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much. I am honored to be here. Very excited. Never been here before. As a matter of fact, I almost got lost getting here, but I was able to find you.
You made it, and you're here in one piece, and that's what matters. Enrique M. Buelna?
Buelna. It's a tongue twister even in Spanish, but yeah.
Enrique M. Buelna is a historian, writer, researcher, painter, and sculptor. His primary motivation is to recover and highlight the experience and contributions of Mexican American and Chicanos and American history. His research and teaching focus on the intersections of class, race, labor, civil rights, immigration, culture, and identity. He is the author of Chicano Communist and the Struggle for Social Justice. He has published work in alternative planning history and theory and has written several open ed articles for LA Taco and Calo News.
Yes, and Dr. Buelna's work focuses on recovering and preserving the stories of Mexican Americans and Chicanos whose contributions have often been overlooked in traditional history books. We are very excited to have you today, Enrique.
All right, thank you very much.
So, Enrique, let's jump right into it. Tell us about your journey into history and the research that you did and the work that you did for so long in Cabrillo College, and just tell us how did all that begin. Tell us where you got the inspiration to do the work that you did.
Well, I guess a lot of this goes back to my upbringing, right? So both my parents were immigrants. My dad passed away about 3 years ago now, I think. It's just crazy to believe. He was from Nogales, Sonora. My mom's from Sinaloa. So they came over here to this country in the 1960s. My dad actually earlier, but 1960s. So I'm the oldest of four, and so I was the first one to go to college. I did my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara. And it was there that I took Chicano studies courses. It was there that I got very interested in the study of Chicanos, Chicano politics, Chicano history. I'd have to say that my history, though, was probably at home. I think that my parents certainly had a lot of history that they shared with me. I think that in college I got introduced to the work of Rodolfo Acuña, right, the grandfather of Chicano politics. And then from then on, my interest in politics, I did, before coming to Santa Cruz, I did work in politics. And by the way, I did work for Javier Becerra, who's running. I already put in my ballot, by the way. I am supporting him. I worked for him for about 3 years. I also worked on various other campaigns before getting my PhD, before getting my doctorate. But it was with the doctorate that I got interested in this radical history, and that was completely by accident. Nothing. I mean, when I did my work at UC Irvine for the program, I was under the direction of my advisor, and he really helped me out a lot. But this was my first delve into oral history. So oral history is not something that I had studied, but it meant that I got to interview a lot of folks folks who were still alive, folks who could still tell me about what was going on in the 1960s. So that's what made it exciting. The other thing was this is radical history, so this is radical activism. So that meant that the folks who I was interviewing were members of the Communist Party, a history that I knew very little about. So that's what got me started down this road. So it's labor, it's race, it's identity, it's language, immigration, all of these different things I sort of put into this book. And the reality was that Mexican Americans, some anyway, were members of the Communist Party, and that party did have significant influence on all kinds of political activism, and that's what the book goes into. And then when I came to Cabrillo College, I took over for another faculty member who had been there for almost 30 years, and I took over his bookshelf, his history, and I continued the coursework for another 20 years.
Wow, a lot of history right there that you just gave us. And why is it important to recover the stories of Mexican Americans and Chicanos and keep those stories alive?
Well, primarily it's because we've been a part of this country since the very foundations and beyond that. When I went to school, the curriculum did not include us. As a matter of fact, even to this very day, the curriculum oftentimes does not include us. We're not a part of it. Or we're simply seen as another sort of immigrant group, but we are beyond that. We're a foundational population, a population that was here before the founding and the movement of the United States West. So we've got a long and rich history. Within labor, we also have a very rich history. Involvement in all kinds of, from the Knights of Labor to the industrial workers of the world. We've been involved, we've been engaged, sort of fighting and struggling for workplace, for better wages, for better working conditions. We have always been a part of it, but history just doesn't highlight those things. So part of my responsibility has been to bring as much of that as possible. So it's important because we've been a part, we've been here. We've always been here.
We never left.
We never left.
And the stories are important to tell. And a big part of that, the historia that is so resonated with the indigenous, the Chicanos, with the Mexican American, is the indigenous story of how we started and that all that rich historia que tiene California, Mexico, and Aztlán and all that stuff. It's like that story. You're right. That story is never taught in schools. It's never even mentioned, and it isn't until a lot of the students get to like the college level that they start to hear about it or learn it. And if they're lucky, their own parents are telling them that story. And it's just it's great that you're doing this kind of work to educate the generation that's here and all the generations that you were able to educate over 30 something years.
20. I'm not that old.
But yeah, thank you.
I want to uplift something that you said, Enrique. Like you mentioned that early on you knew you wanted to go into Chicano studies. For a lot of students that I've worked with, even from my experience, I've never heard about Chicano studies as an option or even as a major. So I was just curious to know how you heard about the topic, or was it an instructor, a mentor? How did you follow that path?
No, definitely. So it's two things. So when I did my undergraduate work at UC Santa Barbara, definitely it was El Congreso. So El Congreso would be our version of Mecha, right? But we were called El Congreso, so that had a long history in Santa Barbara. So I was welcomed by that sort of that group of students, and I found that fascinating. I just loved it. I grew up in LA, but I grew up in South Central, what is today now South LA. But if you know where sort of Vernon is and Western, Martin Luther King Boulevard, Lamert Park, I grew up in that neighborhood. And so largely it was an African American neighborhood when I grew up in the 1970s. So when I went to UC Santa Barbara, I swear to God, it was like Disneyland. That's how I felt. I felt like it was Disneyland. It was just such a beautiful place. Yeah. But definitely I was out of my element. But so when I was introduced or when I was welcomed by these students, I thought it was such a great thing. The other was Chicano faculty. So one of the faculty that two faculty who I really embraced was Zaragoza Vargas, who had been there for did a lot of labor history, the history especially of Chicanos in the Midwest. Then the other was Alberto Garcia. Alberto Garcia was not Chicano. He was from Nicaragua, but holy cow, did he, sort of bring in the history of the civil wars, for example, and in Central America, sort of brought all that in. I learned a tremendous amount from him, and in fact, I did my thesis on the wars in Central America. Right, this is during the Reagan. Okay, wow. Now I am sort of dating myself. So, and I looked at Mexico's policies towards those civil wars, and then compared those to the United States. So, so he had a great influence. But Zaragoza Vargas was my hero. He taught me not only how to write. He was a great editor of my papers. But he then influenced me to continue to go on. He even told me at one point, "You ought to get your PhD." I said, "Yeah, I'm not going to go do that," and I ended up doing it, which is really weird. But he saw that potential when I didn't even see that, so it's kind of fascinating.
That's powerful, and that just speaks to the importance of mentors, right? Other Chicanos who have walked through that path and guided you, because, like you said, they saw something in you.
Hey, Enrique, I want to ask you a question. Back in the 90s when I went to high school, there was Proposition 187 that came out. And I went to Aptos High School, and we fought for Chicano studies. And there was such a big backlash because we were wanting to bring Chicano studies to Aptos High School. And people were saying, well, how come we don't have Irish studies? How come we don't have all these other studies of all these other razas? Why do you think that in the 60s Chicanos fought for Chicano studies? Why was it so important to bring Chicano studies to the schools and to the universities?
Well, it was because this history was completely ignored. We just did not exist, right? So it was an effort to showcase our history, to bring that history into the schools where it was completely ignored. So if you don't know who, Rudy Acuña, right, sort of considered the grandfather of Chicano studies. But there are many others. But I remember teaching this one little part in the course, in my slides, right, and where he mentions the thing that got him animated was when he was asked, so what do you want to study? What do you want to do research in? And when he mentioned to his advisor, I want to focus in on the Mexican American experience, the response was, why would you want to do that? They're not an important part of American history, and that really got him. Or that Mexicans don't have history, I think, was more accurate. And he was shocked by that, right? Where he naturally understood and that no, that's not true. Mexicans have history. How do I know that? Because my parents talk to me about this history all the time. But that history was not reflected in the schools, and so the civil rights, the fervor, the movement, the energy was to reclaim that. And part of that was also to reclaim your indigenous roots, that other aspect of our history which has been purposefully just stepped on, right? Just ignored, oftentimes by our own people, right? Our own gente. And so those movements sort of came hand in hand. But that was the reason, right? To see ourselves reflected in the curriculum.
Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back from the break, I want you to think about this question. And I want to know what your perspective or what your answer is what does the word Chicano mean? Because there's been a big debate over the years of where it came from, how it came, and who identifies. Some people don't identify as Chicanos. A lot of people do. Where's the indigenous role in all that? But think about that. And we're going to take a quick break. We're listening to
KSQD Santa Cruz and KSQT Prunedale.
Thank you, Adela, for such a beautiful voice. You've been, everybody here says, wow, Adela must have been doing this for years, but
no,
she's been doing it enough to sound good on the radio. And in the studio, we have Enrique today. We're talking about his career and his book and everything. And right before the break, we asked him, what does the word Chicano mean? And where did the word come from? Can you give us your teachings, your perspective on that, please?
All right, so that does that's an important part of both of the courses that I taught at Cabrillo. So we start off at the beginning with sort of those origins. The term Chicano was an old term. It was had been around probably. It was probably around in the United States before 1900. It was a term, a negative term, a derogatory term for people with low morals, a shady background, and so it had been around, not everywhere, but it was, and it had gone around. And by the 1960s, Chicano youth were looking for a way to reclaim their identity, their place in this world, in this region, in this country. The term Chicano was what they did was to reclaim, take that word, which was negative, and then turn it on its head. And the idea was that if you're going to look down upon us, and the they was Mexico and the U.S., right? So in both places, oftentimes Chicanos who seem to sort of hover in this middle area, this middle ground, this borderlands, that if you're going to say negative things about me because I don't eat the same way you do, I don't speak the same way, I don't dress the same way, and I don't look the same way, then I'm going to grab that term and I'm going to embrace it, right? And so that's what they did with that term. Now, the term Chicano for some also has indigenous connotations to Chicano or Chicano, right? In the original sort of use of the word by the Mexica, by the Aztecas. And so there is this idea of this connection to indigenous roots, this word. I'm not going to say, how accurate that is, but certainly this was in the minds of these young people who were searching for identity, and they grabbed onto it and they took it. This was a term that parents were not all that happy about. Immigrant parents in particular were not happy about. And let me just tell you, when I went to college, my first semester, my first year, I came back home and I told my mom, and I slammed my hand on the table, I am Chicano. She turned around, she said, Enrique, are you sure? Isn't that like talking about gangs? And I said, oh my God, no, Mom, it has nothing to do with gangs. But that's to show you here, my immigrant parents were thinking that term was associated with gangs, with violence. And I said, no. So it took me years to try to make her understand sort of why I had voluntarily taken on this term in the 1980s. It taking on the term, though, was more than just cultural. It was a political message. It was, I'm going to be assertive. I am asserting my right, my responsibility. So the term was broader than just cultural. It was political, and that's I was taking both parts of that, right?
And one thing that came to my mind when you were describing Chicano, ni de aquí ni de allá. You're in between, right? And then when you mentioned how your mom, is that a gang term? Was she referring maybe because she grew up in the Pachuco times, in the Zuzu riots? Because that's what, a lot of the Chicano term came from too, from those tiempos when the Zooters were around. They were described as Pachucos and gang members and this and that. But it also reminds me of Zoot in the play, how when the Pachuco got stripped, and even then when he got stripped, but down to his calzones, he was still a warrior. That indigenous warrior came out, right? So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Enrique. A lot of good knowledge that you shared right now, and I hope that our listeners are enjoying what they're listening to.
Yeah, I'm just, the word identity is coming up, like the power and identity of just the word Chicano. I've heard Chicano, Chicana, and then recently Chicanx with an X to become more gender neutral. The word Chicanismo to you, Enrique, like how does that look? Because you're also a maestro. How does that look in theory, but also in practice in your class? How do students connect the word Chicanismo, the action behind, or I should say, how does it look in your classroom? Like when you teach that, how do students respond? How do they connect it to their lived experience?
I oftentimes ask many of the students, so how do you all identify today? And I get a mix of responses. I don't think that very few use the term Chicano. And if they do, they understand exactly how I sort of described it just now. So it's a new introduction, but I included within the history that we're learning, and I think that in the end, I think students have understood sort of what this journey has been about. The interesting thing is that I start the course going all the way back to indigenous cultures, pre-invasion, after invasion, the colonial period, and then when I bring it up to the present, there is this sense, there's this understanding, this landscape of politics, of survival, right, of struggle. And then finally, I think they get a sense of the term and why I would self-identify. And I say that, right? I self-identify. This is, I've taken this on. And I think that they've understood, they get a sense of that. Whether they decide to take on the term and self-identify that way, I don't know. But at least they get an understanding of that sort of in the course of teaching. So it's not just identity or culture, but it is political. Right?
I see.
So,
Enrique, I heard Adela say the word Chicano, Chicana, Chicanex, and now there's this latest one that came out as Chicane. What does that mean?
well, I mean, my sense is Chicane is another version of Chicanex, right? But Chicane, or the E at the end, is now
N-E.
from it's now looking at the Spanish language and trying to more correctly sort of understand, because people in Latin America or in Mexico wouldn't understand sort of the X at the end, but that's beyond me. But that's my understanding, is sort of trying to be more sensitive to the language, but basically the same idea. Yeah.
Well, we could go down this conversation forever, but I want to talk about your artwork. I want to talk about your book. I want to talk about you also want to be a screenwriter. Tell me, let's start off with your artwork. You've been an artist and you do art. Tell me about your artwork.
Well, I mean, so a lot of the, oh my gosh, so I have a family, I had kids, a full-time job. It was always difficult to do any kind of artwork, but I make a little space in the garage, and I was able to do that. I basically work in multimedia, sort of acrylics, paper, pen, markers, and all that kind of stuff. And so oftentimes the themes were, sort of indigenous plants, right? Themes of indigenous spirituality. So oftentimes, and I also include sculpture, but it's paper mache. So I've developed this art form where it's paper mache, but it's added stuff. So it's almost like clay, like paper clay, or that I put over the paper. So, but oftentimes indigenous spirituality. So I include a lot of that. I mean, so I'm still in the process of sort of learning, sort of experimenting. I even took courses here at Cabrillo on screen printing, which I loved.
Wow.
And so now I got to expand, So I told my wife, if we buy another house, it's like we got to have a studio attached to it, 'cause, and it's just going to be mine. But then the other thing, though, so I do that. So the other thing that I do, though, is write. So I'm a decent writer. And so one of the things that we've discussed in our courses is the lack of Chicano presence in film. I wish I would have been able to teach a film course just to talk about sort of the what is going on sort of in the industry. Why aren't we out there? Why do we continue to be invisible, right? Even in Hollywood. And so I have a lot of stories. I'm in the process of writing and putting together several screenplays, and now I'm actually going backwards and converting one of my screenplays to a novel. So that's what I'm doing right now. And that one is titled Ofrenda Starter Kit. And so it's a journey of a character through, sorrow, right? But also of reclaiming sort of her indigenous past, right? Grief, right? And what where are we with this with spirituality? I mean, how do we understand it, and how does this character sort of deal with that? So I am in the middle of trying to get that published, and then I'm going to be looking for someone to help me produce this, make a short. out of it, because and then introduce it, let's say, to film festivals or things like that. But I'm going to need some help. That's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, Enrique, where do you get your inspiration from? You're talking about spirituality. Are you a spiritual person yourself? And you're talking about the indigenous culture. Do you practice ceremonies, or where do you find your inspiration?
Okay, so I was going to say, no, I'm not sort of there, but I respect the culture and that history and those experiences. So I taught, for example, like I said, in the courses, I have 2 courses. One of them really goes into those roots. So and to see that culture so affected by colonialism, right, has really sort of let that impression on me. I mean, how did these indigenous people deal with the collapse of their world? How did they deal with needing to square their belief in spirituality, in their sense of the world, with this new Christian one that was being imposed on them? I mean, how do we understand our place in this? I can't even imagine the hell they went through in trying to figure out how to rebuild a world that was being destroyed right in front of them, right? So I think that has left an impression on me. I think that has allowed me to sort of think about things. So, for example, another screenplay that I've already completed and actually turned into contests and have gotten some good responses to is one on the life of Joaquin Murrieta. So Joaquin Murrieta, if you don't know, Joaquin Murrieta, he was alive during the 1840s, 1850s. This is right before the U.S.-Mexico War, and then just after. Joaquin Murrieta comes to California, and he experiences what many Mexican Americans experienced in California during this time. And this was a world that's turned upside down for them. But his case is fascinating in that eventually he leads a life of crime, right, as a way of dealing with the sort of economic, political, and social marginalization that they're experiencing. And at one point, right, he's leading a large contingent of folks who are rebelling, oftentimes, doing crime, right, in California. And then you have a contingent of the California Rangers who are sent out to go get him. Anyway, I'm going to cut the story short, but eventually somebody's head gets cut off, right? And the history was that it was Joaquin Murrieta's head, and Joaquin Murrieta's head was then cut off and placed in a vat of alcohol, right, and then paraded, and his partner's hand was also placed in a jar with alcohol and then paraded around the state. And the reason that it was done so was, again, to impose terror on the Mexican American community, right, to basically get out of the gold fields. You're the losers in this contest or in this conquest, and stay in your lane, that type of thing. Ultimately, by the way, that his head and the jar of alcohol eventually made itself to San Francisco, where it disappeared after the earthquake and fire that affected San Francisco. So this is real history. So what I did was I took that history, but I took it into the world of science fiction, and I created a screenplay and a story based on that story as the foundational story.
Wow.
But then I go into crazy stuff. Into crazy world.
And you said it would disappear in the earthquake in the 1800s?
No, this is 1906.
1906. You're right. Yes,
so that head stuck around for almost maybe 50 years, maybe less than that. Right?
There was I went to Mexico when I was younger. I can't remember. I was like 10 years old, but they have a jar with somebody's hand over in Mexico from one of the wars. I wonder if it was his. And then probably not, but yes, they do. They have a jar. I forgot. Oh man, I want to remember where it was at, but yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
No, but you asked me where do I get the inspiration? It's basically all this history. So all of the history, right, that I taught, right, from my goodness, from hundreds of years, thousands of years before the coming of the Spanish, all the way through the colonial period and afterwards. I mean, that's where I get my inspiration. So I've got a lot of stories just based on that. Of course, then I'm very creative, right? I take creative license to kind of take it into different directions. But at the base, it's sort of Chicano characters. I'm placing them directly into history and then going crazy.
Wow.
And Enrique's being humble right now, but his art, you should see it. When I went to his office, it's like beautiful. He has like this big loteria card that he painted during the pandemic. It's nice and bright. It shines some light on COVID and what was going on during that time. But he also has like this huge school. We always use it at Cabrillo events because it's so beautiful. It's like made out of paper mache, but it uses very particular like bright colors.
So I was gonna say, so the COVID one is titled El COVID, and then where the numbers on top of the card, loteria cards, it's 19.
Because it started 2002.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, my wife said no, you can't have it at the house, so I have to put it in my office. So I got a little gallery going on in my office. Yeah,
I see one of his pieces at the one that you won. Remember?
At the Madrinas and Padrinos event. That was the hummingbird.
The hummingbird,
which
right?
Now,
Poshli.
It became our logo for the Chicano Latino Affairs Council.
Yeah. Beautiful work. That's right. You're listening to From the Streets with your host, Adela and Omar Dieguez. And in the studio, we have Enrique Buelna talking about his book, Chicano Communist, talking about his history at Cabrillo as a Chicano teacher and history teacher, sharing a lot of knowledge. Like they say, throwing down clecha for everybody out there, all the Chicanos out there. He's giving a good history on the Chicano movement and very honored to have you here in the studio with us.
And on your book, Enrique, so Chicano Communist and the struggle for social justice, tell us, what was your writing process? What inspired you? What is the book about?
Well, the inspiration actually comes from my advisor. So Jeff Garcilaso was my advisor. So he's the one that recruited me to UC Irvine. And he was the one who really helped direct the process. He had interviewed this couple, but his focus was on track workers, right? Railroad track workers. And so they didn't do that. But in the process, he interviewed some incredible stories. And he said, listen, would you be interested in talking to this couple and maybe focusing your research on radical Chicano activism? And I said, that's fine. Look, at this point, I was married. I had 2 kids. I had a house, a mortgage, and I'm thinking, look, I need as much direction as possible. So I just jumped into it, not really knowing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. So basically, the first thing was to go and interview these folks and talk to them to see what it is that they had been doing. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was not necessarily trained at oral history. And so what I did was I went to the interview with no recording, nothing at all. I just had a pencil and a notepad, and they started talking, and my mouth basically just, hit the floor.
Wow.
Because I was surprised by everything that they were telling me. And as the story unfolded, and first of all, these folks were in their 80s, and their memory was just incredible. I got to corroborate this by speaking not only to other folks, but then also finding them in the archives. Now, that was the exciting part. So I slowly got into the oral history. I bought a recorder, got more organized, started getting my tapes in order. And the story that unfolded was pretty incredible. So we're talking about sort of beginning in the 1930s, right, during the Great Depression, and their story goes all the way through the 1960s and 1970s. And then it turns out that they were a pivotal part of the Chicano walkouts of 1968. That blew me away. So I have this incredible trajectory of history, and I said, and I shared this with my advisor. Later, my advisor, after sadly my Jeff Garcilaso passes away, my next advisor would be Vicky Ruiz. So for those of you who may not know, Vicky Ruiz is sort of preeminent Chicana historian. She comes to UCI. I then go under her wing, and she becomes my mentor. And it was she who told me, she who looked at my writing, who was, it told me what archives to go to, right, and things like that. And in that process, what unfolds is an incredible story in which Ralph and Sylvia Cuaron were definitely a part of sort of major historical points in Chicano history. Labor organizing, organizing a major civil rights organization, the Mexican American National Association, which would only last about 10 years, but it was a response to LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. This was the preeminent, by the way, they still exist, preeminent sort of Chicano civil rights organization that's born in 1929. But ANMA, the Mexican American National Association, was born in 49 in response to what many felt that LULAC was more conservative, right? Very, very much sort of English focused, not as in your face type of an organization. And again, I'm probably not doing any of this a good service, but the point is that this was a response to that. But it's going to be destroyed by the FBI. So Ralph Cuaron, for example, and Sylvia Cuaron, the family, were involved in The Salt of the Earth. So The Salt of the Earth was an important film. I'm not going to say it was a major film. It was an important film that comes out in 1954 that highlights a mine strike by mostly Mexican miners in New Mexico. What made this film unique is that it was produced, filmed, and written, right, put together by blacklisted writers, producers, artists, actors during the McCarthy era. And so the film was supported by various unions and also the Communist Party. So Ralph and Sylvia, it turns out, were members of the Communist Party. Not anything that I understood or knew, so all of this was new to me, but it was pretty exciting. It was fascinating to sort of learn about sort of their activity. So I had a general sense of communists, all this sort of, negative, dark, evil, but that's not what comes out here. What comes out is a much more pragmatic, much more nuanced look at this organization and how it functioned in American history for Mexican Americans, and then to find out that Mexican Americans were involved in this organization was pretty fascinating to me. So that's how I ended up sort of delving and sort of really just tripping into this story. But and then also towards the 1960s to discover that they were a part of these walkouts that happened at Garfield High School in particular was pretty fascinating. Yeah, it was pretty wonderful too. And then of course Vicky Ruiz asked me to look for or make a petition for an FBI file on the couple. I didn't think that I was going to get anything, but sure enough, both of them had extensive FBI file reporting on them. I got those through a Freedom of Information Act request. And so everything that they told me, the FBI corroborated. So love the FBI, right? If anything, they are very accurate with their record keeping. Oh, I don't know about accurate, but they're good at record keeping. So I was able to corroborate a lot of instances, points in their lives with a lot of detail from the FBI. So it was kind of wonderful.
Wow.
Enrique, it sounds like you've done a lot of research in writing this book and a lot of hours and sitting down and talking to the right people. And let me ask you this: what's one story you wrote a book? You like to do screenwriting. You were a teacher. What's one story that you haven't told that needs to be told?
Oh my God, that's a hard one. I don't know. That needs to be told. Like for example, like in. Like maybe if I were to turn this into a screenplay or a story.
What's a story that you're dying to tell right now?
Ooh, dying to tell.
Like what is it that you want to tell that people don't know yet, that you're waiting to put on either on a book or a screenplay?
I think that over the years I have gone over or spoken to my classes about various characters, right? People that have played important roles in Chicano history. And there are plenty of characters. One character in particular, and right now her name escapes me, Andrade, I believe was her last name. She is a figure out of Chihuahua who who becomes very wealthy, right? When her family, I think her parents sort of pass away, and she receives the family's wealth, which was just tremendous. But what she does as a young woman is to give it away. Why did she do that? Because she was immersed. She believed in the ideas of and this is during the Mexican Revolution. So the Mexican Revolution is about to, or sort of at the beginnings of exploding, and she believed in the ideas from the radicals, the socialists, the anarchists, the belief in this notion and idea that we ought to share the nation's or the world's resources to create greater democracy. So she believed in these ideas so much so that she gave all of her wealth away to all of the, and this is a derogatory term, to the peones, right? To the very poor, the peons, right? Those essentially who were slaves working on her family's lands, and she gave it all away. And then she at some point leaves Mexico, leaves Chihuahua, goes to the U.S., has a whole other career, raises a family, all the time working for the Liberal Party, el Partido Liberal Mexicano, the PLM. So this is the Ricardo and Enrique Flores Magón outfit, right? So it's they living in the U.S., again, criticizing the dictator Porfirio Diaz in Mexico. And she joins sort of that effort. And she has an incredible career. I would love to sort of write a screenplay and a story, but I'm still gonna make it sci-fi. I'm still gonna include some crazy stuff. But I would love to use her as sort of this base, and then bring in indigenous sort of history. Bring in, for example, the Yaqui in Sonora and other indigenous groups, and maybe work in some alternative history. So what would have happened if the PLM had embraced, for example, indigenous groups who were looking for greater independence within Mexico, and then take that story into that direction? So anyway, it's a crazy idea. But
no, it's a good idea. I like it already. I can't wait to see when you really do that. Make it happen.
It's on the line. You'll see it in a few years.
It's always great listening to you, Enrique. You're like very passionate. Like whenever I take classes, generally I enjoy, instructors that are very passionate about what they teach. And we could totally see that in you right now as you're speaking to us.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. And one question I had for you, Enrique, is during challenging times for our communities, where do you think Chicanos and Latinos can find inspiration and strength to continue building identity, hope, and resilience?
Where can they sort of find that? Well, I don't know if I have, a very informed answer. But I mean, one of the things that I'm going to continue to do now that I'm getting retired is I'm going to continue to be involved in as many activities as possible. Continue the work that we've been discussing here, but also be involved in the community. So I am proudly now a member of the Friends of Watsonville Parks and Community Services. I'm going to continue to do that kind of activism, bring in some interesting programming for the community. Build on that, right? Build on that sort of engagement. I've got a few meetings where I'm going to be talking to folks about thinking about running for political office. So I love doing a lot of that. Maybe I'm not going to run myself, but I'm going to get other people to run, right? Got to convince them. So, that type of engagement, I think, is important. I think that keeps that energy, that flow going, that engagement, that involvement. And when you do that, you get our point of views out there, right? You get our ideas, right? Our yearnings, our hopes, our dreams, right? Instead of letting others, right, do that, we become a part of that, right? And helping people to lose their fear of getting involved. Right, I think that's part of what I want to be able to do.
Instead of letting others tell our story.
That's right.
And we tell our own story.
We tell our own.
I wish I would have met Enrique a couple of years ago. I would have took one of his classes. Sounds like he's a really good teacher, and just listening to him, it sounds like the students were engaged and really got something out of his classes. And you know, and Adela's always talking about you. She's always Enrique this, Enrique that, you know.
I totally appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Great teacher and also great leader. You know, like
Yeah.
working with Enrique as co-conveners for the Chicano Latino Affairs Council. It's just really great. You know how respectful he is of women leadership and making sure that you feel that your opinions are also part of the
I totally
conversation. So
You know
I wanted to say I really appreciate that from you, Enrique.
We were
you.
talking about something, Adela, when we were talking about this this show, and I said, "What makes Enrique so great that you want to put him on the radio show?" Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, and I said I think Enrique, as a male, really respects women leadership. And at least for me, like
Yeah.
I was able to always feel included, in
But
the work that we were doing.
I don't want to put you on the spot. But those are not the words you use.
What words did I use?
But you know what? But that's keep on going. Tell me. I don't.
No, I'll leave it there. What are you trying to say?
No, but I think you didn't say it in a bad way, but I think what you said is like he's open to women leadership.
Yeah, which is powerful.
Which is powerful, and we don't see that today. So that's great that he's open to I don't know what the correct word would be, and just a few times that I've met you, Enrique, I haven't met you. I've seen you a couple times at Cabrillo. You can see that right away.
Oh, I appreciate
your
that.
charisma,
Yeah, thank you.
the way you carry yourself is, you're a very humble person, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and do this radio show. I know this is not going to be the last time.
Oh, I hope not.
I hope that we could,
This
do
is
more and
fun.
more of this, and maybe we could do a series, and tell your stories through the radio, whatever. The options are and the possibilities are endless.
We need 2.0 for like his next book.
Yeah, sort of sharing new ideas, new stuff that I might be writing. That'd be fun.
Enrique, we got 5 minutes left. I want to give you, your last comment. Anything you want to share with us before we end this show today?
No, actually, this is very exciting, but this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? You're having this show, right? We're talking Chicano content, and I think that there are others who are, who would be willing to share sort of very similar stories, and I can now, right, share with you maybe some folks who'd love that I think would be good to interview and things like that. So I don't have anything else to share. I'm just tickled that you guys invited me here. I love this little office that you guys have here, and I just would love to be able to come back and talk about any topic. That would be great.
So you don't have nothing else you want to share? I'm going to shoot you some questions. Favorite food?
Definitely tacos.
What kind of tacos?
Carnitas, lengua. I mean, just your regular carne asada está bien.
And now that you're retired, what is one thing that you have to do now that you got time?
I have to take care of my gardening, and I definitely have to work on my studio. So I've got a lot of fixing up in my little studio to get a lot of the artwork going.
Wow.
And how is Enrique going to take care of himself now that he's retired? How does he find that? How does he take care of himself?
Definitely, I'm going to be doing a lot more exercise, more walking. I love walking. I love hiking. I do it, but now I'm going to do it on a much more regular basis.
Wow.
Definitely.
Adela, you got any last questions for him?
I'm just inspired and empowered just by hearing Enrique, and I'm so happy that you have a lot of things in mind to take care of yourself that you're looking forward to, and we hope to see more of your artwork. More loteria
so that's
cards.
the other thing.
More
Sort of
loteria
how do
cards.
I get I'm working on a website. My niece is helping me set up a website where I'm going to showcase the art, and then got to find a way of then selling the stuff. How do you do all that? I am terrible at all that. I am horrible, especially on the social media. So social media stuff, I really have to up my game there.
Yeah.
But you started your first Instagram, Enrique, so you're like more.
I'm barely
advanced.
Oh, he's
there.
on Instagram now?
Barely.
He's
Oh
managing
my
our
God.
Instagram.
Enrique, one last question. So this is Adela's third show she co-hosted. What do you think? What do you rate her?
Oh, I think she sounds great.
Yeah?
I think she's like I said, it seems like she's been here for years. I mean, her voice on the mic, at least what I'm able to hear, sounds great to me. I think she's doing a great job. Oh yeah, I would say so, definitely.
This was your final, and you passed it.
Oh my God.
Enrique just certified you right now.
My
You're
goodness.
official DJ
You're too
today.
much.
All right, well, Enrique, thank you for taking time out to be here. We really appreciate your knowledge, your passion, and sharing it with everybody here. And I know this won't be the last time that we'll have you here on the show. And with that, you're listening to KSQT Santa Cruz, KSQT Brundale. You're on From the Streets with your host, Adela and Omar. And this is us signing out. Thank you for being here. Everybody drive home safe. We'll see you next time.